It's a big question. And of course, there's a lot of technical innovation happening, and we have high hopes that it will help us solve major issues and help us improve social services delivery and democratic access. And the question is, of course, like, is that true? And are we really seeing the consequences of technological innovation? And how do we make sure that real-world systems of exclusion, of bias, of human rights violations are not actually replicated in our technological creations? And we have some great speakers, real thought leaders on this topic. And I would love to just have them on stage with me, actually. Can I invite you, Jeroen van der Mos? Yes, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a sec, but please have a seat. Bei Wang, yes, you're here too. Hi, welcome. We also have Supri Khatib. Where are you? Yeah, there you are. Hi, welcome. Please join us. Yeah, and we also have a speaker online, Peaks Crafts. Peaks, are you here? Yes, hi. Welcome. We'll get to all of you in a sec, but before we start, we wanted to ask you a little question. Imagine you're in your favorite cafe or bar somewhere, and you're having a good time, and someone comes up to you and tries to start a conversation around Web3 and AI and the metaverse and NFTs. What do you say or think? What do you think? You can, all of us here as well can use Menti. Go to menti.com. Enter the code 53973967, or indeed use the QR code, as many of you are doing already. What would you think or say if someone would start that conversation with you? Do we have some results coming in already? Let's see them. Speak English. What a nice pickup line. What? Where is the human touch? Oh, tell me more. Someone wants to know more. Hell yeah, let's discuss. Coffee. Someone needs coffee to digest this. Woohoo! Interesting. Okay, so some mixed feelings here, actually. You Google it all secretly to be able to even have the conversation. That's a really good one. Let's speed it up. Democracy News style. Okay. Oh no. Okay. So very mixed feelings here about these topics, and yet it's terms that we hear all around us more and more, or we will in any case. You are robots. Let's put up the VR glasses. Perfect, let's keep it rolling. Nice. While we see your responses coming in, I would love for my guests to introduce themselves very briefly in a minute. Who are you, each of you? What do you do? And how would you describe your relationship to technology in one word? Who wants to start?
I can start.
Yeah, please. Yeah, you might need a mic, you're right.
Hi everyone. My name is Bei Wang. I'm Chinese origin, but I live in the Netherlands for 22 years. At this moment, I think I like to call myself the first title as cultural broker, because my entire career has always been as a media and communication consultant between different cultures. Currently, I'm the university lecturer of Hogeschool Utrecht. I'm teaching a course called Creative Business, but I'm also the co-founder and co-owner of Straight Fire Studios. We are actually a digital company that's specializing in metaverse and Web3. At the same time, I'm also one of the initiators of Pan-Asian Collectives. So it's a media organization really aiming for Asian representation in the Dutch society. So just a short word, also sentence about my relationship with
your relationship with technology.
I think I play more as a role as a connector to the technology, because I have a liberal arts background, but now I work closely with all these technology we are going to talk about. So
Connector, nice. Thank you so much. Who wants to go next? Subhi, yeah.
Hi, my name is Subhi. Sobi is also fine for those who cannot pronounce it. And I work, I do a few things like Bay. So I teach also about diversity inclusion at Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. Very much also in, let's say, a program, co-design and co-directing a program on the intersection of technology, human rights, and system thinking and system change. I am co-founder and a chair of Hamle, which is a Palestinian organization focused on digital rights for the last 12 years. Also co-founder and a chair of the Hummus Academy, where we talk about hummus and decolonizing cuisines. And I also work on storytelling. I had some work with Netflix and with Al Jazeera and some other media organization also on those regards. For me, when it comes to one word to technology, I would say excitement.
Excitement.
Excitement, because for me, technology is something that we can always look at it and how it would relate to our own excitements and how we would like to see the world later on. So for me, it's an excitement.
Nice.
That would be the word. And
Thank
I give it
you,
to Jeroen.
Sophie.
Thanks. I'm artist Jeroen van der Mos, and I'm an artist working with new technologies, which mainly is artificial intelligence at this moment, to create all sorts of art installations. Build these for example, universities. So I'm an artist in residence at the moment at the TU Delft, but also at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. Also building these installations also for non-profit organizations. So worked for Amnesty and the AIDS Foundation, also on art projects. But also more in the business world, so more for organizations like Sogeti, Capgemini, Microsoft, ING Bank, etc. And luckily also working on quite some autonomous projects, which are just projects I undertake with some acquaintances and friends of mine. And then we'll just see if they end up eventually in some exhibit or some museum somewhere. And my relationship to technology, if I had to describe it in one word, it would be an open relationship. In the sense that it's not just about me and technology, it's also about many, many others, like, for example, nature.
Nice, an open relationship with technology. Great. Peaks, our fourth guest.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Dr. Peaks. My pronouns are they and them. My salary comes from the University of the Arts London's Creative Computing Institute, where I work as a senior lecturer and course leader for a MA program in Internet Equalities, which explores how power relations and structures of oppression are organized, embedded, and perpetuated in Internet technologies. And I also participate quite actively in the trade union movement, which I don't know how it's going in Amsterdam. It's really picking up steam over here in the UK. And other activist groups that I won't name at this time. But my relationship with technology, it's hard to pick one word, but I'm definitely in the oh no camp.
The oh no camp.
I think some days it's more in the oh, and sometimes it's more in the no.
Oh no. Yeah,
Oh, no.
I'll take that as one word. Oh no. Yeah. Thank you, Peaks. Thank you so much for joining us. All of you. So we're going to start, luckily, with a little mini lecture from Bay around some of these core concepts so that we understand what we are talking about. So thank you so much for doing that for us. Yeah.
Slides, yes. It's a big honor to give like a very crash course on this. Just a very important like disclaimer. What I'm telling here is not like hardcore knowledge because the definition will shift or change. This is just some fundamental like framework and concepts there. So first of all, I'm sure you all heard about the word metaverse at this moment. It has to already becomes, I guess that especially due to this whole Facebook company changes name into Meta, and then almost the discussion is completely hijacked, and that's why in the public discourse you kind of see people thinking, oh, is Facebook the metaverse? Well, first, no, for sure. The short sentence I put it on the screen is actually from a very, very neutral technological perspective. So the metaverse is called a single, universal, and immersive virtual world that is facilitated by the use of VR and AR. I guess here, what more important is just see those VR and AR are the keywords, and then
virtual reality and augmented reality.
Virtual reality and augmented reality. And then another description I think I personally quite like by a lot of companies I work with, they tend to call it a network of 3D virtual worlds focused on social connection. So as you can see, social connection is being mentioned here. So it's about connecting people. But of course, what does it lead to? Well, that's about to see and discuss and happen. The visual I tend to use, because when we talk about new concept, visualization, it's the best way for people to understand. So I took both one picture from, the English language media, and the other one is from Chinese language media. The reason why I'm talking about is I think you all know that China has its own digital ecosystem, its own internet. But one thing in common that you see this bluish color, and then you also see this very animated 3D world. I guess this is the visual description about metaverse. However, don't be hijacked by this either, because you can have all kind of version of metaverse. It can be very, very animated. It can also be look very super real, surreal, but that's just a part of it. What I do want to ask for your attention is the 7 layers of metaverse, and that gives a more technical kind of explanation what I needed. So you can see in the whole development of metaverse, you have the hardcore infrastructure, that's hardcore technology, hardwares, but you also have softwares. And then as you also see, it's evolved not only a technology innovation, but also a change of business models. So just to sum up, metaverse is very, very early, and I think a lot of people say, when do you think it's going to be realized? I don't know. I don't give a number, because it really depends on how the mass adoption and also how builders are further developing it. We can discuss. And then the most important reminder is metaverse is not defined by one single company. So if you read Microsoft has a metaverse or Google has a metaverse, no, that's not the metaverse. So that's my explanation of the metaverse.
Thank you.
And quickly, this Web3, very quickly, because Web3 is even more new concepts. There's a lot of discussion nowadays in the Web3, and I think the one single description is most people like to call it the decentralized internet. I guess that the whole decentralized word already sum up some DNA of it, and the active people that really building it and very hard working on that I think decentralization itself has a tone of democratization. So in that case, Web3 is also a kind of paradigm shift. It's also changing the current the internet model we are experiencing, and the fundamental technology is blockchain. But one thing for very important to address the Web3, it's about user-centric. User are the owners of. So I guess that we can also discuss in today's discussion about whether those technologies are really I would say breaking or even making the future that we are all work hard towards with.
Wow, thank you so much. I want to clap for you. For making at least two of these, yeah, you can hold on to it, two of these core concepts more clear to us. I don't know if there's any clarifying questions already? Or was this quite clear? Yeah? Just one, yeah? Oops. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. The question is just for clarification. So you talk about the Web3 and then it's literally just the Web3, but what are clear examples of what those are? Because I saw something like a link. Is that like a platform where you start to own the content that you produce? Yeah, so just clear examples of what type of apps that you're actually talking about.
That makes it different from Web 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think we can't. Web3 is truly early. I think the words started to really like occur, even though it's coined earlier in 2014 by the co-founder of Ethereum. So I'm sure, I don't know if any of you are also following the trend, because we have to talk about blockchain when we talk about Web3. So, but now I try to avoid talk about blockchains because blockchain is the back end. So the Web3, I think the term is more like how you compare with Web 2. So on Web 2 refers to like all the social media and the interactive media platforms that we are using currently. Web 3, however, is based on blockchain. So there's a lot of companies in different apps that they claim themselves to be Web 3 because they are built on blockchain, such as Ethereum or Polygon. But at the same time, I think we really also need to be very careful about the current mainstream discussion, because there's also a lot of Web 2 company, they are addressing that, oh, we are moving towards Web 3.
Could you sketch an example of what would make something really Web 3? Like that we can't imagine now yet, maybe, but in 5 years, something around the internet works like that?
Well, I don't know, this is the part I feel always difficult about, because a lot of people tend to kind of compare Web3 immediately with crypto. And crypto currently has a very negative kind of connotation because of the crypto market and bear market. But I would say, I don't know if any of you know OpenSea. OpenSea is a platform that it's almost like an e-commerce platform of NFTs. So sorry that now another term, NFT.
Can you explain what an NFT is very briefly?
The NFT is non-fungible token, but NFT, actually, again, I want to also make a disclaimer, because what you read in the mainstream media, probably NFT is those Bored Ape, those like profile photos. No, NFT is not that. What I see like in the future, probably our certificate, graduation certificate, our passport might be turned into NFTs, because that is to really like proof of ownership and proof of authenticity. So quickly get back to Web3 is, Web3 is, maybe another example is Binance blockchain, because Binance is a very big company that they are working different type of activities, such as like you have the financial part, but you also have like charity part. So what I want to say, one thing is like the whole rise of the blockchain technology is itself, it's already a movement of people trying to claim their ownership, so that we are not the data, we are not the products on the current Web 2. We become an owner of ourselves. I think in a way itself, it's almost like we are getting our own social like value back.
Right, so our data is not owned by the big few tech companies, but it's kind of broken down again and into more decentralized, everyone
approach,
owns the internet in a way, and it's more democratic.
So we are another comparison is currently we use like Web 2, so we are the tenants, we are the renter of the internet. The Web 3, ideally, we are the owner of the internet.
Of the internet, yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Great. In this first part of our conversation together, I would like to explore, the main problems, actually, the challenges that we're seeing, or maybe not, a lot of us are not seeing them yet, but with the current technologies and the technologies that are coming up. And I would love to start with you, Peaks, because as you explained, you're leading the MA on Internet Equalities, where you are. I would love to know just like what are some of the most important things you teach your students about Internet equality?
Oh gosh, well, following up on what Bea was just explaining there, I think it's maybe easiest for me to respond to a couple of those points because from my point of view, there are, Bea's very optimistic and I imagine a very different future. And so whenever I hear someone talking about the future that we imagine, I like to ask who the we is because it's certainly not me. Sorry, Bea.
Yeah. Who is imagining this future? Yeah, very core question.
Right, and hopefully I can maybe say more about what I would positively like to see in a little bit, but just to respond to a couple of the points that Bea was bringing up, I think ownership is really important, but I don't see ownership of content as being the only important part of it. I think that ownership of the infrastructure is also very important. And what we see even in this new kind of decentralized technology landscape is that there are still a few small players that own the vast majority of the infrastructure. And it might be that shifts from the state to Google and Facebook, and from Google and Facebook to what they call like whales in the blockchain or crypto world, the whales being the kind of owners of large amounts of these ecosystems. And so I don't see that problem of ownership as going away.
Right. That's a good point.
The second bit that I want to raise is around this, like what technology can actually do for us. And I think it's important to think about technology as not really being separate from bureaucracy or, of course, other related political systems. What technology relies on is they're called algorithms. You've probably heard this word algorithms. An algorithm is just a kind of set of rules, and it's kind of like an idealized form of bureaucracy where when you have an algorithm or a piece of software that's playing some role in an organization or in a decision that's being made, the rules that the algorithm is following are the only thing that it can do. So computers basically become like, excuse my language, but the most hard-ass bureaucrats that you can imagine. And so this is kind of, the more that we're relying on technology in providing infrastructure or support for decisions, the more we're going towards this, obviously technocratic sort of mode of governance, but one that is really inflexible. And so where that might be appealing in a case that there's a lot of corruption and bureaucrats are just not even following the rules, like they're just totally untrustworthy, maybe there's some interest there. But my personal experience of hard-ass bureaucrats is that they're not particularly fun to work with or easy to work with.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
If you've ever lost access to an email account or you've ever lost access to some app that you use,
you're right.
Experience the difficulty of regaining your identity. It'll be those kinds of problems, but in every sphere of life that we allow technology to touch.
Hard layers of bureaucracy to get through. Thank you for those additions, Peaks, for now. I would love to also bring in the others here. Sobri, to start with you. I mean, we're now kind of, it's kind of dazzling, like, all these concepts we're talking about and that we're starting to understand. But what is important for us to know? People working in civil society, NGOs, activists, academia, what should we understand about how this is affecting the issues we're working on?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because I guess some people in the room are like, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
How does this relate to my work or my life personally? And I think it relates if we try to strip all those big concepts to the, I would say, the essential things in it. So one of the essential things that they have mentioned, and Peaks as well, is about our data. And when we talk about data, it's the information about us that could actually be used against us. And I guess many people here would think and remember things related to surveillance and data collections. At the very early days of Facebook and other social media platforms, we were donating everything about us. And now we're more aware of, no, my privacy is an important thing and I need to take care of it. However, when we talk about those new technologies, now we are in the place of creating or co-creating or trying to be co-creators of those worlds. So now would be the time for us to try to, I would say, be more aware of the concepts. And if we work in those worlds, we need to understand how those would become an essential part of how people live their lives. So if we speak in, let's say, this conference have took place in the early 90s, and we talk about the internet and how that will affect our life, people will be like, yeah, we'll see, what is the internet? But now if you look at around us, we're all using the internet. We're even talking about the right to access internet as a right. And so when we talk nowadays about the metaverse, let's say, or Web3, we need, first of all, to be aware of what's happening in order to make sure that the social injustices will not be reproduced again in the new, I would say, created places. And this
Can you sketch for us how you could imagine that these technologies are going to affect social justice or are going to affect climate justice, or how could it affect actual issues we're working on?
So if I can give a concrete example, last year there was, I would say, the first reported case of someone that basically reported that she was sexually assaulted in a metaverse.
Oh.
Yeah, in the meta platform of metaverse. And then no one could really react to it because we don't have laws about this. We don't really have the knowledge about it. Some people were like, oh, come on, it's an avatar. What are you talking about? And this is when we talk about basically how we are reproducing or recreating. When we talk about, for example, racism, all those basically concepts of the metaverse, especially the metaverse, it's about the recreation of the systematic, I would say, oppressions and discriminations against people who are historically, I would say, oppressed and marginalized. But also when we talk about basically the Web3, we talk about the ownership. And usually the ownership will go to the people who already have the means now, and then they will gain and own basically again. So, and this is where we have kind of the opportunity to make sure that this will not reproduce. So when I talk about actual cases like the one I mentioned before, or when we talk about basically the reproduction of this bias, yes, in the new alternative realities, you can create your own avatar that would represent to how would you like to be like. But the question is can you really, really choose who would you be like without being judged or without being discriminated against? So it comes really to the basic concepts we live in our daily lives, but they will become more present in places that will become, again, the new reality. So,
and I can also imagine the other way around, because it's indeed we're reproducing biases and oppression in those new virtual worlds, but we also see now already how big tech is affecting or polarizing society. So the real world issues are also very much
it goes really there's really many different layers here that we also need to talk about. There are the companies that, of course, own things and they're trying to become the ones who will become the bigger players in whatever things that are there. There are the governments that don't really, I would say, up to speed with the technology and with regulations and with laws and with how to make sure that those will be safe
Right.
places. But even when you talk about companies and governments, because there's also like this relations between them, which is more of a collaborative relationship sometimes, which is dangerous, because this could lead also to giving more and more trust to companies that don't really have, I would say, the interest of the user, like let's say, as the main thing.
Yeah.
You have also the individuals as well, because we need also to talk about that eventually the people who will do things to other people are people, mostly. And here we also need to touch about education, and we need to touch about like the reproduction of power dynamics in different spheres.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, indeed, and it not as have a side effects of a company like Facebook that Trump is elected, or that there's like ethnic violence, etc. And yeah, indeed. Jeroen, I wanted to ask you, because I know in your work it's important, which we will see in a bit, but that bias and the oppression of technologies is actually very important. Where does that come from? Like, how does it work that this bias and this oppressive technology is
Oh, well, I can
created?
speak for example, like creative AI systems. So you can use, nowadays, you can use AI systems to create imagery. And these are systems which, to some extent, have a little bit of creativity in them. So they can, if I put in a bunch of pictures of cats, like 10, 20,000, I can train the AI model on that, and eventually it can be able to create a cat itself. This has really risen to really advanced, complex systems nowadays, with which you can really create all sorts of imagery. And this is, of course, you know, these systems work based on data. So every biased sort of form or racist form of data will eventually be reflected as well in the output. So this is how replication of bias, racism can be something that you will see.
It's just the people programming it.
Yeah, so basically there are two reasons for this. Basically, it's also depending, of course, on the system builders, so the designers of the systems. It's also based on the data sources. And this could be, for example, also, you know, these bigger models are always trained on pictures that are found online. So this is also due to basically what people put on their websites, picture-wise, or on Instagram, etc.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of a taste here of what is happening. We had like a little summary of what is the metaverse, what is Web3, what is NFTs. Thank you for that bonus. Indeed, AIs and these terms that we should all know. We spoke about the ownership of both the content and the infrastructure, as Peaks raised, that things will not really change if the owners of the infrastructure remain concentrated and power remains concentrated there. The computer becoming your worst nightmare, bureaucrats, as we can all very much imagine. And just this last point of bias and oppression being reproduced both in the new virtual worlds where people are already being sexually assaulted, for instance, but also having an impact on how we operate ourselves. So we are at quite a crucial moment here where this is going over our heads for the majority of people, but the future is being shaped. And who is imagining this future, indeed? Who is shaping this future right now, as Peaks pointed out? Just as a in-between little summary, because of course we also want to speak about how then, right? Like if we don't want this scenario, what are some of the alternatives and solutions to create a more healthy, more inclusive, more responsible, more safe use of this technology, and also for our practices, social justice and inclusive development? How does it actually, how could it support? So Jeroen, as we just mentioned, you have an example with you, actually, of your work. I would love for you to show us like some of...
Oh yeah, sure. This, of course, these are topics which are studied and worked on very broadly. And this is a project which you see.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that does kind of bring like a glimmer of like, interesting. Like, how can this really, bring a new type of creativity and like the possibilities of what you can create as a human using this type of technology. What did you think of it, Peaks?
Oh gosh, you're putting me on the spot here. What
Yeah,
I think
I
of it?
did.
It's very nice. I do a little bit of crafts and stuff, and can imagine putting those little mirror charts together. That sounds like fun. I think once it comes to the AI bit, when thinking about the future, I find it easiest to think about, like, what if we just stopped? Like, it's so hard to imagine the world without the reliance on all the technologies that we're currently so used to. And so, I don't know that I would necessarily take such a hard line if we were in a position that was a little bit more techno-pessimistic, but because there's so much state investment and big money investment in technology, I feel like I have to take a hard line and say, we just have to stop, and pull back as much as we can, because as you've raised, and everyone knows that the technologies that we have are just inextricably linked with the climate catastrophe and with the reproduction of the same inequalities and systems of oppression that I think a lot of us here, all of us here, are keen to fight.
Yeah, to respond to that, because I read on your website that really was an eye-opener for me, where you said, like, how do we move beyond the terms equality, diversity, and inclusion to build counterpower to the modes of oppression in society that are replicated within tech? I felt that was really important. So it's not so much about trying to build diversity, inclusion, and equality through tech, but really building a counterpower. How do you imagine that using tech?
Using technology? Well, I don't. I mean, here I am on Zoom.
Yes,
so,
hi.
Contradiction. I considered taking the bus to Amsterdam. I just, I couldn't. I mean, maybe, I think in my ideal world, I wouldn't even be able to attend this talk or this panel, because there wouldn't, there wouldn't be an easy way for me to do it. It would take a week for me to take a boat or something, and that's kind of what I want to live in. So when I say counterpower, that means, building on the kind of sort of, I suppose, some strand of Marxist thought. I'm not super good with my political theory, but building, alternative institutions and communities and frameworks for being with each other that don't involve the things that we don't want, for those of us who want to be in community with each other, doing that kind of thing. And I don't see any other way at this point besides just doing it and seeing what happens in those kind of microcosms that will have to exist.
Yeah,
in a parallel world. Yeah.
Bay wants to respond to what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to respond to that and also respond to your question, because I started my career in 2004 when I joined in Greenpeace International, and that was actually also the time when Web 2 started, like when you have the digital technology and social media. And I remembered what I see, like how in Greenpeace they started developed social media campaign. And that was for years that I learned like how technology can actually connect people beyond distance, beyond like all these like physical obstacles. And that was, I started to develop my interest, because I studied liberal arts, for Christ's sake. So I'm not a tech person, but I think now technology today developed more and more into the phase that it's not just high tech, but also low tech. And for example, currently through my own company, we work with a lot of developers all over the world. And I also see a very interesting and very hopeful shift is that you see, we work with, for example, developers from India. We work with developers from Nigeria, and the younger generation of like either developers or builders or creatives, they are from this usual like we call them like developing country or underprivileged regions. So you started to already see this kind of like a shift from more and more move towards the decentralized top-down model. And in terms of diversity, I was invited to a discussion a few months ago about the humanities in the metaverse. Back then, we also addressed that it's so important that because like new technology like metaverse or Web3, it's in very, very early phase. So it's even more crucial for us to put all these cultural, ethical, moral, and or social like thinkings in it, so that we don't make the mistake. Because Sobi just mentioned about like you already have incident happened. If one thing, because technology change constantly, that's the changing factor. But the one thing doesn't change is the human factor.
Yeah, and I understood from Anders Sandberg, this future of humanity professor, that human values and morality are actually extremely hard to program. They're very nuanced and very layered, and therefore it doesn't just pick it up. Yeah,
but I do think like technology give a lot of like empowered and enabled currently a lot of like underprivileged or underrepresented group. So I think that is the moment to really make use of it. Because I think, if you started from the roots and you will already like make the right DNA in this project, in this movement.
Yeah, thank you. Sopre, I would like to ask you to just briefly speak to, you just mentioned your work, Hamle, an example of how global civil society can actually use this to defend digital rights. Can you speak to that briefly?
Yeah. So at the very beginning of Hamle, so about 12 years ago, we took a very radical approach. We were just like basically against like everything that is happening mostly. So Hamle is based in Palestine and very much focused on what's happening to Palestinians and the oppression of the occupation, like the Israeli occupation. But then slowly we started seeing also like how censorship on Facebook is happening, on Google is happening. Some Palestinian villages don't exist on Google Maps. And then you start also understanding the different powers of different things, like how people think that some places are empty simply because Google Maps says they're empty. And then we said, okay, let's maybe take a more collaborative approach with those big companies. And so nowadays, Hamle is, I would say a consulting or advising body when it comes to human rights, especially for the Palestinians, well, on all in the MENA region, for Meta, with Google. We work also with the United Nations Human Rights Council on the breach of digital rights. So there are many things that we're doing. And honestly, we don't really know if that's a good approach or not, because on one hand, you want to make sure that you're affecting the system. But on the other hand, also you want to make sure that you are still guarding your values.
Yeah.
Another thing, I see it in my work at the university. We get grants and sponsorship from companies like Meta. And then you're like, can I really develop like an ethical guide? And I go and talk about like ethics in the digital say place, while I get money maybe which is not fully ethical, I don't know. So there's also like those, I would say, kind of like places where you need, or maybe you don't, but I think we need sometimes to be pragmatic also in how we collaborate and how we work and we do things. As Bay, I also worked with like Greenpeace and Amnesty and all of those organizations that started saying, okay, those are emerging technologies, let's use them. Let's make sure that we can do that. So for me, also when we just to take it a step further to the metaverse and to other places, it's also about, like I shared actually just before with Jeroen and Bay, about something that we did about 6 years ago, a project where we in India like had a bus and gave guys to get on the bus and use VR to experience how a woman experiences public transport.
Oh, wow.
And the reactions of those guys were, I would say, amazing, because for them, how much we have talked about this topic, they couldn't really get it, or they're like, yeah. But when you experience it yourself, you understand it a bit more because you're living it, basically.
Yeah.
And so also when it comes, there are all those places of about seeing yourself represented and seeing a role model that actually like you.
Yeah, exactly.
And those are things also that can happen in different like metaverses, already happening in the pop culture and different movies.
Yeah.
The very last example I want to give is about how for some places where like there is a lot of censorship, you can build kind of places that people can access things that are censored physically or in the internet, because you cannot really kind of block the platform itself. So there are different ways of making sure that those technologies or connection to different platforms can really empower you and give you more accessibility as individual, as a human rights defender, as communities, and so on.
Exactly. Thank you. Chihiro wanted to ask a question. The mic is not on yet.
Hello, hello. Yes, thank you. I had a question to deal with two elephants in the room when it comes to technology. One, the internet being as polluting as the international aviation industry. Are we going to have an internet in the future? Two, technology being developed or having all the research and development of military behind it. Both plastic and the internet have a military background. So really wanting to ask about demilitarizing technology, and especially when it comes to border racism. We see already with OV chip cards that they're operated here in the Netherlands by Thales, which also has problems when it comes to Palestine and other occupied territories. Or actually, speaking of Greenpeace, their building is secured by G4S. G4S, the security system, or people that have a long track record of racism in deportation, even death in deportation, oppressing Earth defenders at Standing Rock. So when we talk about security and technology and border racism, I would love for this panel to reflect on the role of technology and being here as social justice organizations, how we interface with that.
Can I pick this one? Because
yes,
I love to react to it.
Yeah.
Especially, I will start with the military aspect. Unfortunately, almost all the technologies we know about have started in military. From the internet to like even like the VR, all of those are like, if you will actually think really about the development of any technology, it starts military, go private sector, then maybe public sector, then NGOs picks it up. And this is, yeah, it's a bit a shame, but of course understood because it's come to resources. So I would say demilitarizing technologies usually would take time when we as individuals start like kind of take some, I would say, ownership of it. Or we try, because we cannot really sometimes do that, especially when it comes to infrastructure, as you said. Like in Israel and in Palestine, Israel was very, I would say, advantaged, maybe as much as China, a little bit less, when it comes to making sure that those technologies are to oppress people or to collect information about people, and to make sure that those people cannot raise up. One thing that we need to address here, again, going back to the basics, as people, as human, to do any change, we do it collectively. And to be able to do it collectively, we need to communicate. But when you, as a government, own and control the communication platforms, no real collective work can be done. Yes, individual things can be done, but individually, you cannot really, I would say, change things. But this is the, I would say, the military aspect of it. And maybe sometimes how we can create or try to create alternative things. For the polluting side, this is something actually I thought a lot about when it comes to NFTs. Am I for or against? It's have a lot of like impact on environment. Yes and no, crypto. But then I think because we sometimes think about, I would say, how this affects us, we don't think that sometimes there are some alternatives and solutions. I still actually, by the way, don't have a straight position on this one. But one of the recent development in technology, especially in the crypto, is about not doing it in a mining way where you consume the power. You need a lot of, I would say, computing power, but it's now building on a new alternative of how we can do this in basically 0.001% of the current like electricity that we need. And this is still in development. It's still like not fully there, but it's there. I would say like in the sense of like being developed and being there. The very last one, I'm just very fast because it was about like, you know, development, military and polluting, and the very worst was about security and an organization like Greenpeace and using I would say it really goes back also to organizations, profit, non-profit, anyone, trying to make sure that they're really having, I would say, an overall and a holistic way of looking at their providers and collaborators. Because sometimes as organizations, we want to make some choices easy, and those easy choices would lead, I would say, to some decisions that are not maybe the most considerable. And sometimes they're hard because you have no alternatives, but then you don't think about, okay, there are no alternatives, maybe we want to create or co-create new alternatives. And this is where I would say the power of us as nonprofits comes when to collaborate on building those new platforms.
Thank you, Sophia. I want to be in your class. There's more where that came from. As we open the floor to a few more questions, we also have a question to you again. And we'll use Mentimeter to ask for your answers. So menti.com and the code 53973967, or the QR code that you see. You're already starting. And we wanted to ask, who should be responsible for safeguarding digital rights and inclusive technology? Who should bear the responsibility here?
Can I respond a bit to the last question as well?
Yes, of course you can.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I've been a bit radicalized by this question asker, which is great.
You've been radicalized by the question asker. She tends to have that effect on people.
Because I think that nothing against my fellow panelists, only Allah can judge. But I feel that I'm on a panel of apologists, and so I have to take a little bit of a maybe more inflammatory stance, because I think that you might hear my cat in the background. He's very loud. I think that there's a real danger here of accepting technology as a given, and the kind of narratives of technology as enabling for social justice. I think perhaps some kinds of reformist action are enabled by technology, but I think if there's too much reliance on technology for organizing, then it's not hard to shut down the internet. Even, I mean, all you have to do is shut down the power grid. You know, it's like the fact that there's so much attention and interest in technology, you have to ask why is that there? And it's there because of all this money, and it's there exactly because of these connections with the military and with the ease that technology affords surveillance and being able to track whatever happens. I mean, that's like the kind of the selling point of a lot of these systems.
Who is really profiting here?
Who's profiting here, and who's profiting not just from the specific technologies, but also from the broader kind of ideology and imaginary that's being sold? And why is there such little research on like low cost, like $2 computers that are zero carbon and that you can build at home, and that you can form like a community mesh network with? Like, it's just, I mean, some people do that kind of work, but it's not the stuff that's mainstream at all. And those are the kinds of technologies, if anything, that might get us somewhere. So yeah, thought I'd just throw in my 2 cents there.
Yeah, and again, also going back to your point of like, yeah, thank you. That you've been making from the beginning, that we shouldn't just take it as it is, this internet situation. Really critically, radically look at who is shaping this and who is benefiting from that. Yeah, thank you. So can we go to our Menti results for a moment? Okay, so we feel government should take responsibility, users, everybody, civil society, no one and everyone. That's kind of what it comes down to. No one and everyone, the people using it. NGOs. Okay, so some of us think it should really be civil society who's a watchdog here. I don't know if that's also the responsible party then, or government as the responsible, although we said already the regulation is very much behind. So big tech themselves. Who wants to comment on this from our panel?
I'm surprised there is no media. Because media eventually is one of the main, I would say, places where they will bring things to the light, what's happening.
Yeah.
Many of the things that are happening within those big companies or for governments come and we know about them because of the media. So this is like my very first reaction when I see that no one mentioned media. It's interesting. The other thing, yeah, it always like comes down to like taking the different layers of like individuals, organizations, and governments. And I think we also, when we say government, it's a big because within the government there are many different arms of that government.
Yeah.
And sometimes they have a very contradictory interests. And this is also another thing that we need sometimes to break down some of those terms. For me, one of the most important things is education of the people who building those things. I'm not here like to point fingers at them as like they're to blame, but to be able to stand up, to be able to say this is not ethical, this is not right.
And civil society might have a role to play in that.
Could be, but it's very much about really, because now if I look at like programmers, you are going to a school of IT or you even self-taught, all the things are about that technical part. You don't get any history classes, you don't take any sociology classes, you know nothing really about ethics. Where Peaks teaches, it's an MA program. It's like you as a programmer go to that world as someone who starts building something as if it have no effect whatsoever
on the world around
and
you, yeah.
it does affect people's life. Like, you know, when Jeroen mentioned about data sets very much are not inclusive because programmers just do from what their world is. And so they exclude many other people.
Yeah.
When we talk about, I would say, building an algorithm, and you do it as you are the user. You don't think about people with different disabilities or different things. And this is why I'm saying I'm not here to blame or point the finger to them, but they need to be and get more education when it comes to those things. Because,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting close to lunch, but I want to see if there's any burning questions that need to be answered still. Yeah, we have a question here.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Wouter Vertongen, R&W Media. We've been very much focusing on the risks, threats, and concerns with technology. So my question to all panelists, let's assume it's 2025 and we actually bring this panel back together. And we're celebrating the successes of the evolvement of technology and the use of it. How would that look like? What has happened in the coming 3 years that we can actually celebrate the success that technology has enabled us in the sector to accelerate the impact we're after?
Very interesting question. I would also love to hear all of you, but that means we need to keep it super brief, the answers.
I think 2025 is a little bit too soon. Maybe it needs to be a little bit longer time.
10 years, maybe? 20, 30, 8 years?
I still are full of hope because I guess that I always like to see technology a little bit like fire or electricity, that it brings a lot of threat, danger, but it's also bring a lot of convenience. So what we all discussed is all happening, but I think in the area that what I see, that's why I think especially Web3, the blockchain technology is really, really early. But if you look at like the founder in the Web3, such as like Ethereum, and actually sometimes I tend to look at the human side, and they are, in one hand, they are tech people, but at the same time, they are the founders coming from like suppressed countries, regions. So in that case, I think it's already kind of show a certain kind of effort to kind of like to kind of break through the suppression. And then in that case, I also want to address that in my company, we work directly with like all these Web3 creative studios. For example, one of the projects we did is with a group of digital artists, like but then they are based in Ukraine. And then what we did is like they created their digital art, and then through the platforms that we are able to connect them to the fans globally, and they're able to be paid or kind of financed with the crypto payments, so that in a way it's also to help them to sustain. And then I see all these, maybe those are very small projects, but I think collectively, and I also see like if we kind of like make use of the new technology to connect better. And one word like in the Web3 movement people like to use is the community driven. I think in that case, in a way, it kind of like puts the traditional, may it be the governments or the big tech companies, is more about communities. I always see communities are like-minded people. So let's, so to back to your question, I think maybe it's not better than now. It's still going to have a lot of like things that makes us feel like, yeah, the world is really pessimistic. But at the same time, I think maybe in about 10 years, the communities from different parts of the world will be better connected. So in that case, I think there is more hope.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask the rest of you to keep it a lot shorter, actually, and really focus on, indeed, what are some of the hypothetical successes that we can celebrate in 5 to 10 years' time?
Yes. I am not optimistic as much as Bay, honestly. I think that, well, I will just keep it very short. I think one of the successes that we could celebrate, that some people that usually couldn't connect are connecting. Some people who don't have accessibility to certain experiences can have it. I'm talking about like even just visiting a museum, or like being able to play online with different people, or being represented in different avatars that give you different ways of experiencing your own identity. So I think those could be some of the successes. However, I don't see none of the successes is on, I would say, systematic level. Like all those would make some people enjoy more things, but none of the successes within 10 years will be able, in my opinion, to counter the current power dynamics in the world. That's my...
Jeroen, do you see any successes in the stars?
Limited successes, I guess. I mean, in the coming years, if we really would think about something really practical, or something that I hope would be happening in the coming years, is that you would take a little bit of the financial incentives out of social media. So basically, the base. You know why Twitter is such an aggressive, weird environment? It's because there are models behind it which are based on just selling ads. So people stick to the social media if there's a lot of anger, etc. there, and this sells ads in the end. So that's what I hope. To some extent, that there will be more regulation in that field, which applies to many of the big tech companies.
Which will help us connect in other ways.
And in the farther future, I guess, but it's very, very speculative. I think the main problem at this point is also that the technologies that we use, these are impossible of taking ethical decisions. So that's just impossible for a computer to do. It's always something that will remain human. The interesting thing, I guess, that's for me at least as a very speculative artist, is that there might be some sort of technologies like quantum computing, neuromorphic chips, new chip technologies, that will eventually enable systems to have some sort of way of doing actually really ethical decision making.
Thank you. Thank you. Peaks, lastly, we know you're not the most optimistic of the panelists in here. Rightly so, but
very optimistic, just not about technology.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not as a human probably, but just to ask you, in case we succeed in like making a more just, more equal technological future, what could that look like? Just very briefly in 2 sentences.
Gosh, well,
or 3.
I won't make a prediction, but maybe a plausible kind of potential, which is what I would like to see, constrained by the reality that I understand. And I think the reality is that lot of terrible stuff happens all the time and will continue to happen. And sometimes those terrible things create interesting, wonderful things as well. And I'm thinking about the pandemic, which was obviously awful and continues to happen, really. It's not over. But I think for a lot of people kind of collectively, I certainly learned a lot about myself and just how to be with myself in those conditions of self-isolation during the pandemic. And right now, what I'm experiencing is the continuing pandemic, but also a rise in economic instability. It seems like, at least in the UK here, a real potential of political unrest in the near future. Seems like a very plausible future. And so if that does come to pass, and if the convergence of the trade union movements, many unions and workplaces going on strike here in London and here in the UK, turns into some real radical kind of workers' movement, then I can imagine that we might have much less stable internet in 2025. So I'm not sure I'll be able to join the panel, just like I would have liked.
That would be really a real pity.
And in that time of unstable internet, which some places like Palestine already experience, I think what we'll learn, rather than how to be with ourselves, is maybe we'll remember how to be with each other.
Yeah.
Without that.
Nice. Thank you for that beautiful reflection. All right, we've reached the end. We want to end with one final Menti question to you. Very easy one. And so if you go back to menti.com, the QR code or the code 53973-967. And the question that we have for you is, after having heard everything, is tech actually going to make or break social justice? What do you think? And in the meantime, just to summarize what we spoke about in this last part of the panel, which I really intrigued by Peek's point around like building counterpower using this tech. How exactly? We don't really know. We have to find out collectively how to do that. But what we do know is that it is going to be a collective process, that we need communication for that we need to be connected for that. So that's one way technology can actually facilitate. We need morality in what we produce now. We need education, maybe like a year-long program for those building the tech. We can think about how decentralization can be facilitated in our organizations, and we can indeed work with a developer from Nigeria, and we can bring different types of people together. We can, we have to be aware of some of these effects of like the giant pollution aspect, and have a holistic view on what type of security do you work with, or what type, as an organization, take responsibility of like your part in the ecosystem, and hopefully technology can be indeed like fire or electricity. That brings us convenience. It has a threat, and we become more and more aware of the threat, but it also brings us connectivity, obviously, and the ability to come together, and new ways of really being together without the financial incentives behind it. So thank you so much for these reflections. And look, we are slightly on Peek's side, actually. Yeah, and let that be, something we take along, because we're all part of creating this future. So this was only the first peek into this world, and let's just continue to be educated and make sure that we shape a future, an inclusive future, when it comes to this world. Thank you so much.